This is AUGforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered and independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. First, thank you to our sponsor, DataSelf and Velixo. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention two more things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, I'm always looking for victims, guests on the podcast. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn about being a guest on the podcast. Second, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out the instructions at augforums.com/Rolodex to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Wednesday, September 29th, 2001, and this is episode number 50. Upgrade challenges from an anonymous guy sharing his Acumatica customer story. And, first off here, before we even talk about why we're going anonymous here, we got to come up with a name for you, anonymous guy.
Anonymous guy, yeah. I kept thinking Mr. X, right? Is that
Mr. X? I like that.
We go with that. All right.
So Mr. X, maybe, and I think this is good. First time we're doing this, but I'm sure there's other people out there who maybe would like to share some information about their experience using Acumatica, and they're just to give us some of your reasons why you're the first one doing this. Maybe some others will follow.
Sure. Yeah.
Reasons why you're Mr. X.
Yeah, well, Tim, like we talked about, in our emails and the pre-roll, as they call it, it's our Acumatica experience and, has been 90% positive. And I am, I'm a total Acumatica fanboy right now. It's mainly positive. And if this was going to be, a 5-hour profile, like I would feel totally comfortable, given my name and my company and all of that. I'll be honest, my first thought when you asked me to do this was, what the heck am I doing here? Because I went back and listened to some of these old episodes, and the people you have on here, man, they got serious resumes. But I think the only thing that I can really add for your listeners and to contribute doing here, because I went back and listened to some of these old episodes, and the people you have on here, man, they got serious resumes. I think the only thing that I can really add for your listeners and to contribute is to talk about some of our company's frustrations as a small business, implementing something as complex as Acumatica, some of the frustrations that we've had interacting with our partner. And again, like I said, 90% positive. We love our partner. We love Acumatica. But if I'm just going to be talking about some of the frustrating parts, then I don't want to be calling anybody out or feel like if we were going to put our names on it, I'd want to give them mainly positive and a little bit negative. But if we're just talking about the negative, like let's just leave names off of it.
Totally hear you there. And quick comment on your I forget what you said about people's resumes, but I'll let you in a little secret. My goal is on one of these, I would love to talk to someone who does nothing in Acumatica but enter AP bills. I would love to hear about what that experience is like. So if there's anyone out there who only enters AP, nothing else, accounts payable bills, I would love to have you on here. So point is, I love to run the gamut from like super expert to barely involved with Acumatica. I think all perspectives are great.
I think that's a great idea. It's as a user, especially I got involved in with my company's Acumatica implementation about April of 2020. And just sort of Googling Acumatica, there was it was mainly just sort of sales stuff until I found the AUG forums, your forum. And Tim, like as I said before, you're a legend, man. And just sort of knowing that there's other people out there and that there's other people maybe struggling with the same thing you are, even if you don't get an answer to your specific technical issue, just knowing that there's other people out there going through the same thing can be a real big relief.
That's a great point. And to be honest, big part of what motivates me is when I used to work at a company using an ERP product, and I felt the same way. I'm trying to find information. It's mostly sales information, and I wanted more than that, right? So that's part of what motivates me. I just know I was in the same boat and wanted the same thing.
Yeah. Well, like I said, man, you are a legend, really. Like, yeah, like totally. Your forums and everything, such an enormous boon and help to not just me, but I'm sure a lot of people.
Well, before we get into the upgrade challenges, is there any like declassified information you can tell us about Mr. X?
A lot of people.
Well, before we get into the upgrade challenges, is there any like declassified information you can tell us about Mr. X prior to getting involved with?
Let me see what's not
2020?
redacted here. Yeah, so I basically, I've got a really bumpy resume. I sort of been a serial entrepreneur most of my career, if I can even call it that. And then a couple of years ago, there's pluses and minuses to working for yourself and being the boss. And I sort of hit a depression and all of the minuses about being your own boss. They came to the forefront, and I had enough of it. And so I joined this current company that I'm at. It was a friend of mine, and they needed some help, and it seemed like it was just mainly going to be a shop job, manufacturing. And I thought, hey, this will be a great transition job, while I figure out what I want to do next. Challenges and a lot of opportunity as well. And the company was sort of mom and popish. We were working out of a garage. And we're making a medical device out of a garage. And so,
I love it.
Yeah. But they had, studies in progress. So we basically make a medical device that had some very legitimate medical uses, but was also a lot in the alternate therapy world. And over the years that I've been there, and even before I got there, it's more and more it's being legitimized in the medical field. And so, we've been lucky that our business has been exploding. But with that, also our product line has exploded, our sales have exploded. And these are what I always call good problems to have, right? Because it could be the opposite. But so there was just all these unique challenges. And I decided, hey, I'm at least right now, I like not being the boss, and I like being able to contribute here. And yeah, that's sort of where we're at now. We're no longer out of the garage. And we're, a rapidly expanding small business. As I said, I think I compared it before, we're making that transition from mom and pop small to legitimately small business with a lot of unique challenges, right? Because we're making a medical device, we're getting certifications. There's a lot more serial tracking on all your devices that you have to do for those certifications.
Do you mind sharing what you were running prior to Acumatica, and if your involvement in 2020, how much of it had to do with that transition to Acumatica?
Yeah, so we were running QuickBooks and Fishbowl as our manufacturing. So it was just QuickBooks. I don't even know if it was Enterprise Edition. I'm not really familiar with it. So I had my background is a little. From the computer side of things is more just basically as an enthusiast. I was always sort of really into the open source world. I ran it's actually, I used to run Linux all the time on my home computers, and it's Acumatica that got me to finally install Windows. But I'm no expert by any means. I had some friends who were really very technical that I just, due to my own personal interest, picked their brains over the years. And so right around when our company signed our Acumatica contract, is right around the time that I was deciding, like, hey, I think I'm going to try to stick around with this company for a while. And in doing so, I knew we didn't have anyone at our company who was really deeply, a lot of them were there. A lot of them are what I call very good. They're very good with computers. But, they don't have that, deep technical knowledge, and so it's very difficult for them to navigate these waters. And so I basically got involved right around the time when I heard that we were thinking of going to Acumatica. In hindsight, we had already signed the Acumatica contract. And so I just basically went to the office and said, hey guys, I talked about, being involved a little bit more. Do you want me to check this out and maybe, see what I can do to help you guys make this transition? And they went for that. And I ended up becoming sort of our internal point person, interacting with our partner in our implementation. Did that answer your question?
No, I think so. And I think it's very common. Mr. X becomes Mr. Acumatica, and it wasn't Acumatica, and it wasn't necessarily by design. It just sort of happened. I mean, it's not like you have this big plan that was what was going to happen when you got involved there, right? It just sort of
That
falls in your lap and seems to be a fit for you. And
that's
now you're
exactly it.
Mr. Acumatica.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's it exactly.
So it sounds like, even, that 2020, that's not that long ago. Although with COVID, sure seems like a long time ago. But,
Yeah.
now at this point, you're growing, but, would you still consider yourself a smaller business? And even in terms of Acumatica, are you on the small business edition?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we are on the small business edition, and we are definitely a small business. We're, especially employee wise, we've grown a little bit there, but we had about 10 employees, 10 regular employees. We have about 20 regular employees now. And a couple other people who are engineers and things like that. But employee wise, we're definitely a small business, and I think revenue wise as well. We do make a high ticket item, so it's an expensive item that we make. But yeah, we're absolutely still a small business. And and our Acumatica implementation, it's not just implementing Acumatica. It's we're doing, which I think you talked about on a podcast already. We're doing all the pluses and minuses, and implementing Acumatica, but also using the implementation to go over, especially from the manufacturing side, to take a look at our BOMs, take a look at our processes, and start to update them to something that's a little more, suited, because we were basically make to order for most of the time, and we still are a lot. But yeah, it's just, these were BOMs and a manufacturing company, and they did an amazing job for the resources they had. But as a manufacturing company done by people who never really had any experience with a manufacturing company before, right? And so we're implementing Acumatica, and also, right, doing trade-offs on changing our processes, our internal processes. And it's always, a give and take between, how much do we try to customize and bend Acumatica to work the way we're working, and how much do we change our processes to, take Acumatica as kind of the template, for a way we should change and should do things.
Yeah, it's not always super obvious, right? Especially for a smaller company, it can become like a full-time job going through that analysis, right? At least at times.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Job going through that analysis, right? At least at times.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, 100% a full-time job, and that was, some of, maybe we should just get into it right now. That was, one of the real challenges, and I think challenges for a lot of small businesses was when you don't have really any IT person, the IT department, or someone who's really sort of familiar with these things. I had always heard that the business software world was a really scummy world, and it's hard to know, like, how do you even go out and hire a consultant when you don't necessarily know the questions to ask the consultant to determine if this is going to be a consultant that's going to be honest, that's going to give you the best advice for you and not have, other interests in mind. How do you really have a good answer for that question? You just kind of stumble along, right?
I don't either, but I have an analogy. My neighbor did a major remodel on his house, and he was basically a project manager for about 6 months. And coming out of the back end, he's just like, "Oh, I'm so glad to be done with this. I learned a lot." Uh,
Right.
but it's like, when am I going to ever do this again? And I only did it once, and I think that's how most people's experience are. They haven't done an ERP implementation. After
Yeah.
they've done one, they don't ever want to do it again. But you
Yeah.
have to learn a lot of stuff, and then what do you do with that knowledge?
No, totally. And it's, how much, it's always how much time do you spend on any, because, like, on any module, right? On any module in Acumatica or any of these major ERPs, right? You could base a career on becoming an expert. So when you're just starting to evaluate that stuff, how much time module in Acumatica or any of these major ERPs, right? You could base a career on becoming an expert. So when you're just starting to evaluate that stuff, how much time do you spend becoming, well, not an expert, but how much even time do you spend researching that? And then, I mean, if you're talking about evaluating multiple products, right? You're already potentially searching for software because you're so overloaded with work, and yet now to get the software that's supposedly or hopefully going to ease some of that workload through software, how much time do you then spend researching and going back and forth and research, because there's so many products out there as well. How much time do you devote trying to become an expert, just before you even sign a contract, right?
So rest assured, dear listener, we will get to the upgrade challenges, but let's spend a little more time here. I like this. First off, you said some things that I think are great reasons why Acumatica sells through a partner channel. They know that the vast majority of companies need a consulting partner to implement for all the reasons that you're talking about. But
Right.
then you make an interesting point that you haven't even gone through the process of learning how to find the right consultant. And that's a really good point. Even if you're not going to take on the whole Acumatica implementation, which is a bad idea in my opinion, how do you even find the right partner? And that's a very good question there.
Yeah, I brought up to you, and I don't, is one of my sort of red flags when I, first, right, went up there and said, hey, I can help you guys out with this. I started Googling Acumatica, and for me, a red flag, it looked like the consulting firm who we would potentially hire to consult and do our implementation was also the reseller. And for me, my initial reaction to that was, this seems like a conflict of interest because, and I thought at the time too that we were still potentially evaluating several different software companies, but when you are at that stage of evaluating several different software companies, and then you reach out to a consultant and they only sell one product, how do you know that they don't have a conflict of interest? And it's hard to see if they only sell one product that they're going to come back to you and say, hey, this other product is actually more suited toward your situation. And so,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
definitely a
yeah,
double-edged sword there. You either get the consulting company that knows multiple products, or I would say has a somewhat knowledge about multiple.
right.
And then you get into the implementation. A lot of times you get burned there because then they don't have the depth of expertise in the specific product that you chose that you want, right?
Exactly.
Or,
Yeah.
the flip side that you experience, you get someone who's real deep into one product and they can't really represent other products. And there's actually a guy named Eric Kimberling who I've read a lot of his stuff. He founded a company called Panorama Consulting Solutions, and
Okay.
that was years ago. Now he's got a new company called Third Stage Consulting, and he's all into this independent stuff, right? And I've watched a lot of his videos recently. Specifically, he'll rank vendors, in different areas. And Acumatica's landed on some of his rankings. But some of the stuff he says, even about Acumatica, I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. So like, here's a guy
Mhm.
he's embracing the independent side. He can rep a broad portfolio of products, but he doesn't have the depth of knowledge, right? So it doesn't sound right to me. So like, here's a guy
Mhm.
he's embracing the independent side. He can rep a broad portfolio of products, but he doesn't have the depth of knowledge, right? So
Oh, I
then it
gotcha.
becomes a
Right.
budget problem, right? Do you go to a company that specializes in kind of running you through that software selection project?
Hmm.
And there are multiples, not just Eric Kimberling, but there's a bunch of people who do that. Well, then a lot of times you blow your budget. Like you blow your budget before you even can start
Right.
implementing the product you selected. So
Yeah.
they're all challenges, right? But it's good to
Totally.
consider the different angles, and that way, at least when you pick a path, it's not necessarily completely greener on the other side.
Yeah, and I completely, as soon as you said it, your point totally made sense to me, about, yeah, I mean, right, you could have a whole company, right, and experts on each of these modules. You could spend a career being an expert on just each module, and have experts on the whole software, so they can help you out, right, and not be spread across, multiple products. And that totally makes sense to me.
And it seems like you become an Acumatica fan, so that worked out. But actually, I think your biggest competition, correct me if I'm wrong, but your biggest competition is your prior product, and the everything used to be better
Sure.
syndrome that companies.
Yeah.
And I'm curious in your situation, and I've seen this a number of times with Acumatica small business edition customers. And for those who don't know what that is, it's regular Acumatica. It just has a user cap. Normally Acumatica is unlimited users, but you can buy like 5 or 10, something like that. Maybe you
Yeah, I
can
think
add
it's
on after that.
5 normal, and then you can add up to 10, and then you need to go to the advanced edition after 10.
And it sounds like though you're doing the manufacturing edition as well.
We are, yeah. So we're
And is that with
manufacturing
5 or 10?
for 5 users as well.
Okay.
And that seems to be working right now.
So you can do it with only 10 users. You can get the manufacturing edition. But
And
I've seen
that's
a lot of,
concurrent users, of course, right?
oh, it's concurrent users. Right,
It
right, right.
is.
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's better than named users, I think, right?
Oh, wait, yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
so yeah. So then when you're in that territory, you're kind of like right on the edge, right? You're in this gray area between the QuickBooks world and the mid-market ERP world. And what I've seen happen a number of times with Acumatica Small Business Edition customers is maybe they made the move a little too soon. And then they just pull back into QuickBooks because it's just much more rigid in any mid-market ERP product. And I'm curious, are you seeing any of that? Or are you really
Yes.
firmly yeah, go
No,
ahead. Tell us about that.
absolutely. So we are still, and I'm not fully in the financial side of things, but I'm not fully in the financial side of things, but we still do things out of QuickBooks, and our partner warned us against this heavily. But it was even our plan. We did months before we actually went live, months of preparation, and it took our partner a lot of convincing for us not to, for the first couple of months, run Acumatica and QuickBooks side by side. That was something that our financial person really sort of wanted to do, and I think it had a lot to do. Right, they were just completely comfortable with QuickBooks, and here is Acumatica that functions very, very differently, and they didn't have a handle on it. And so I think they wanted to, just have that safety of QuickBooks. The other thing that has been a big, I don't even know what to call it, but just an adjustment. The other thing that has been a big I don't even know what to call it, but just an adjustment is with QuickBooks and with Fishbowl, the manufacturing plugin for QuickBooks. You can basically cheat at any point you want. So we do a lot of serial and lot tracked items. And if you go to enter a serial number and it's not in inventory in QuickBooks and Fishbowl, you just, check a box and enter the serial number you want. In Acumatica, there's no cheating like that. If something's not there, you have to go either just add it, right, and know your inventory is going to be off, right, or you have to investigate and find out, hey, what happened to this serial or this lot number. You can't, there's not just ways to override things, which there are in QuickBooks.
And I think that's exactly why the small business edition of Acumatica failed. If you're in the throes of all of a sudden those orders are just really flowing, your business is really scaling, that's an awful time to then have to switch systems, right? So,
Yeah.
you're doing the right thing in that you're switching now, so you don't have to go through the pain during, the intense scaling part of the business. But then the downside is there's still a lot of need to cheat, potentially situations
Yeah.
that, that you're trying to figure out. And Acumatica is more rigid than QuickBooks. So yeah, definitely very common struggle there, I think.
Yeah, I can totally see it. I mean, right. I mean, one of the things was just, yeah, we didn't have the manpower at the end of the year to count every single lot number on every item we needed, and so we had to just enter the numbers we had from the previous year. And now all of a sudden, right, we're finally now just starting to take care of it with rolling inventory counts and stuff like that. It's one of those, it's the benefit of Acumatica is that it doesn't let you cheat, right? Because then you have, a trusted sort of audit trail when you need that, right? But the downside is it doesn't let you cheat.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Well, this is a great backdrop. So I think this is, and I think this is maybe partly, although from a technical side, I don't think it is, but I think from a culture side, it's partly why the upgrade maybe was even more challenging, just because you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the huge budget, you don't have the huge IT department. It's just you, right?
Yeah.
So, that's maybe why this has been more frustrating even than for, a company that's got a couple hundred employees, for example. But
Yeah, I think so. I think, and hop in anytime, Tim, and get me focused. But I think the frustration with this upgrade situation. So just to really briefly say what the anytime, Tim, and get me focused. But I think the frustration with this upgrade situation. So just to really briefly say what the situation was. So we had an upgrade that didn't go through, and we were waiting on a lot of sort of minor bugs to be fixed by that upgrade, and it took 30 days before the upgrade finally happened, and we weren't getting a lot of answers on what went wrong. And I think a lot of that.
So actually, back up there. Let's
sure, yeah.
Here's the gold nugget that is in the title of this podcast that we're just getting to, but I think we had good background to get here. Give us if you have them in front of you, and you might not, but if you do,
yes.
Give us the build numbers and
okay,
from what to what, and then what to what.
Okay, so we were on 2020 R1. I don't have the specific build we were on in front of me, but we were on 2020 R1 and the 2020 R1, and the plan was to upgrade to 2021 R1. And so we our partner had told us, right, hey, these things are no problem, they go piece of cake, and that was their experience over hundreds of upgrades. And so we were scheduled on a Friday. I don't have the exact date. It was about 30 days ago. And something happened. I don't even know. I'm still not clear on what happened, but there was a mistake between our partner's request for the upgrade and the Acumatica support team, and they didn't upgrade us to 2021 R1. They upgraded us to the latest minor build of 2020 R1, which was 2020 R1 20.1210004. And what happened after that is the upgrade didn't happen. And so they went back to Acumatica And Acumatica's answer to us was, there's no upgrade path for the build you're on to 2021 R1. And so we're going to have to wait for the next release.
Now hold it right there. First,
Yeah.
before your upgrade, did you do a sandbox?
We did do sandbox, yes.
And
So
was your sandbox 2021 R1?
it was 2021 R1, yes.
So there's lesson number one. Lesson number one is make absolutely sure that Acumatica is upgrading you to your sandbox version, because your sandbox is what you did the testing on, right? You know that that environment worked for you.
Yeah, you know, that I didn't even think about that. Yeah, they should have checked the sandbox, right? But yes, totally. Lesson number one, right? Is specify that upgrade us to our sandbox version, right? Would have solved it right there.
Then your point about you couldn't go
there.
Then your point about you couldn't go from, it sounds weird. You couldn't go from 2020 R1 to 2021 R1. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding of it. My understanding of it would be that your 2020 R1 build number was released like after the latest available version of 2021 R1. Does that sound right? And that's why you couldn't go quote backwards, even though from a big addition standpoint, you're moving forwards.
Well, so I think so the 2020 R1 build that we got upgraded to, that came out after the 2021 builds that were out. Right.
That makes sense.
Right.
So then you had to wait, I would assume, for Acumatica then to release the next version. Makes sense.
Right.
So then you had to wait, I would assume, for Acumatica then to release the next version of 2021 R1, so that it's now ahead of, it's released after the 2020 R1 version that you were on.
Exactly. Yep.
So it becomes a waiting game, and you're waiting for that engineering juggernaut in Moscow to go through, you know, the paces of what it takes to release that next full version of an Acumatica build.
Exactly. Right. And so those builds, from what I can tell, are scheduled every 2 weeks. And so they, you know, our upgrade snafu, I think, happened on a Tuesday. And then they told us we had to wait for the week following Friday. So not quite 2 weeks. So we had to wait to the next Friday, the Friday after next, for that build to come out. And what happened was, when that build did come out, which, you know, I sort of justified it. It's like, you know, when you have scheduled releases, you try to hit targets, and sometimes you don't hit those targets. So, you know, I mean, that stuff happens, right? What started to get frustrating in this process was, at that time, so on this Friday, after we waited, you know, almost 2 weeks, that release came out, is that there was a release of 2020 R2, which said, in the release notes, and it still says that, that we could do the upgrade. So we could have gone, or at least I thought we could have gone from 2020 R1 to 2020 R2, and then the release for 2021 R1 had an upgrade path from that release of 2020 R2. So you know, and I sent emails, and I think that this was the point I made the post on the community forum, that when I made the post on the community forum, that you know, that this right, just upgrade us to 2020 and then do the 2021, and everyone thought that was an okay idea. And I still, to this day, never got a reason why that couldn't happen. The Acumatica tech said that they tried that, and they got the same upgrade path error that they got when they tried to go to 2021 R1. And this is where I started to get, did any of that make sense first, Tim?
I think it did. And I think here's where your name of Mr. X is perfect for the realm of conspiracy theories here, right? I think the question then becomes, did they really try it? And was the documentation wrong? Which is very possible. The documentation, you know, there's always, it's never completely right.
Sure.
Or is it because you're small business edition not high enough on their radar, right?
You know, I had thought that. I've never vocalized that, you know. Yeah, I don't know, right? Because it's sort of, you know, the emails I was sending, and my concern was like, hey, look, if the documentation is wrong, your release notes, right? The technical team didn't reach out to the technical writing team to say, hey, we didn't hit that target for the upgrade to 2020 R2, right? You know, take that out. But nobody seemed interested in that except me. And you know, we never got any answers. You know, and our partner apparently, you know, reached out to, you know, starting at this time, you know, you know, I think we're always a pleasant, you know, I hate being a jerk customer, and I hope we never are, you know, but we definitely communicated our frustration to our partner, and so they had said that they started to reach out to all of their, you know, presumably higher up contacts in Acumatica, and they never got replies on the release notes get corrected. Or is, you know, my concern was that it wasn't an upgrade path issue, that there was something else wrong with our instance. And, you know, we're just gonna,
Good point. With
yeah,
your
and that,
specific environment. Yeah.
right. And then that, you know, because now when the upgrade didn't happen after that, we waited to that Friday. The answer was wait till the next release in 2 weeks, you know. And my concern was 2 weeks is going to go by and it's just going to be the same thing. They're going to say, hey, it didn't happen, wait 2 weeks, you know. And which again, it's okay if there's these technical problems, but I really just wanted somebody higher up in the Acumatica technical support to just take a look and just to either say, hey, yeah, those release notes are wrong. So, you know, wait to the next release and you'll be sorted. Oh, hey, there is something. Let's at least start the process of looking into what is wrong with your particular.
But I'll call it a complainy pants.
That's a good one.
You definitely strike me as a nice person. And I think that's even
Thank
why you're only able to quote complain under your alter ego of Mr. X. You can't even do it under your real persona.
Yeah, no,
So
I think I
you're
would
proving your point
implode.
there.
Yeah, my brain would melt. Yeah,
So
well, you know, I never want, you know, I've been on the other end. I mean, in our regular day-to-day business, on the other end of customers who are furious, and I don't see that ever getting anywhere, especially because you're never dealing with the CEO of the company. You know, you're dealing with just someone who's probably overworked themselves, right? You know, trying to do their best. You know,
Well, I've been
and
in that boat as well. And I think, you know, like we talked before, our main point of recording this podcast episode is not to would have, could have, should have, you know, for the sake of complaining about it. Our main point of recording this podcast episode is not to would have, could have, should have, you know, for the sake of complaining about it. Our main point is, hey, if this happens to someone else, how could they maybe have a faster resolution, right? Because
totally,
Acumatica is not perfect. This situation is going to happen again. Probably has happened to others. Maybe let's put some things in the back of people's minds so they can maybe avoid it taking as long or avoid it altogether, right? And
yeah,
I think if
exactly.
you're kind of like down the alleyway now. It's like you realize it's a dead end alley, and in some sense, you're just like driving faster, even though you know you're hitting a dead end. So maybe if we back up to lesson one, I think lesson one was make sure Acumatica upgrades you to the version of your sandbox. Don't willy-nilly and just, you know, oh, let's just go to the latest one, you know, maybe it'll be
Yeah,
okay. Do
totally.
it. Don't willy-nilly and just, you know, oh, let's just go to the latest one, you know, maybe it'll be
Yeah,
okay. Do
totally.
it on the one that you tested on your sandbox, right? So that's, I think, lesson one. Lesson two, maybe, since that didn't happen. So you did your job to request the right one. At least we think that's what happened. And then
Hmm.
if Acumatica really does make a mistake, which is totally possible, they're slammed right now. Acumatica is so popular. Their workload is, yeah, I'm sure they're just working super hard over there. They
Sure.
make a mistake. Is it, maybe this is lesson two. Do you feel like you've raised the red flag adequately enough to force them to restore from a backup?
So I think, you know, and again, this was part of our frustration is that I up until it sort of basically happened on this last Friday, I would have said no. And so up until, they did the manual upgrade, whatever they needed to do. I can't even remember. Did we talk about the final solution?
We didn't yet. We'll get to that. We'll get to
Okay.
that. Stay on the backup for now.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I don't feel like there was. I think we should have gotten a little bit more answers just on what was going on. And yeah, and I think they, maybe not immediately, but I think after 2 weeks had gone by, that first time we weren't able to do that upgrade, I think at that point, it should have been on Acumatica to look into it a little bit deeper and figure out what went wrong and what can we do to fix this.
So I think that still is lesson number 2. I think lesson number 1 is be crystal clear with Acumatica. You want to go to the version of your
a little bit deeper and figure out what went wrong and what can we do to fix this.
So I think that still is lesson number 2. I think lesson number 1 is be crystal clear with Acumatica. You want to go to the version of your sandbox. It's down to the build number. Don't let them talk you into, just the latest and greatest. It'll probably be okay. Now go to the sandbox version because that's what you tested on. This is in general situation, right? There's always exceptions, but in general, I think that's a good overriding rule.
I think that's perfect. Yeah. My first thought was get confirmation, but I think going to the sandbox is even better.
But yeah, have them come back and make sure you have that in an email. This is the version we're going to take you to, right?
Yeah.
And match it to the sandbox.
Yeah. And especially and only if there are these situations where you sort of can't go back, right? If it was super easy to just split the looser with the confirmations, but because there is this situation, there has to be some sort of confirmation or, that we're doing the right upgrade.
So then I think lesson number 2 is to outline. We're not talking paragraphs. We're talking 3 bullet points, maybe. Hey, Acumatica, if we find something wrong with this prior to noon Pacific time on Monday, assuming they do it over the weekend, how do we roll back? Right. So you have that plan. It's just like a few bullet points in an email. It's not like this big Word document or anything.
Yeah.
And it's just, hey, if we find, can we roll back to be exactly like we were Friday night if we find problems by Monday at noon or whatever it is, right? So you have some rollback quote plan or some rollback thing that you're all in agreement if we find problems by Monday at noon or whatever it is, right? So you have some rollback quote plan or some rollback thing that you're all in agreement on that they'll be able to do it if you need them to do it. Maybe that's lesson 2. What do you think?
I think that's a great suggestion. And I think that would be a great way to do it. I don't know how much technically they are able or would be willing to do that. If we, especially small business submitted a ticket like that. If Acumatica is on board for that, I think that is a perfect way to handle an upgrade situation like this.
And I totally hate that the squeaky wheel gets the grease as well. I'm like, hey, I'm the responsible one waiting here. I'm waiting. I got my ticket. I got my number. Call my number when it's my turn. That's the kind of personality I have. But, the reality is taken
care of and out of your hair. Meanwhile, you're super polite, nice customer, and I try not to do it. We try not to do it as much as we can, but I'm guilty of it myself, giving the squeaky wheel the grease sometimes as well.
I think we're all guilty of it.
Sure.
So, then I think we come back to this was like a 30-day ordeal for you guys. And I wonder on this, we haven't talked about this, but I wonder on this, maybe why there wasn't a rollback. Maybe you could get into some of the specific issues you were having. Like I assume Acumatica still turned on for you and you could log in. So you could probably still do some things. What were some of the things that you could not do and how bad was it for, the ongoing operations of your business?
Okay, so there is some subtext to this. So basically, we were still fully functional, right? So, which is also a reason why,
for, the ongoing operations of your business?
Okay, so there is some subtext to this. So basically, we were still fully functional, right? So, which is also a reason why, from what I understand, the Acumatica support has, certain levels of priority that's based on the how much your site works, right? And so we were still able to, do sales orders, do production orders. It was still functional. But what we had gotten to a point, and so there's two things. There were a lot of just little bugs, little issues that were preventing us sort of from smoothing out and implementing other major features. Like there was a bug. I don't even know if it was a bug, but there was an issue with the incoming mail screen. We were trying to get incoming mail processing in order to implement cases. And so there was just some funky behavior with that. And so we had gotten to the point with a lot of these bugs and issues with our partner that it was like, hey, you guys are planning on doing this upgrade next week anyway, or in a couple weeks anyway. Let's just do the upgrade now so we can rule out that all of these things have been fixed, and some of them were fixed by the upgrade. They've just gone away. And so we got to that point where it was like, hey, let's do the upgrade, and then we can continue on with all of these issues, continue on implementing your site, customizing your site, et cetera, et cetera. And the subtext to that is our CEO and our mini small board at our company have not been sold on Acumatica, and they had started taking demos and sales from other ERP vendors. And the sort of what their idea was, hey, let's give Acumatica to the end of the year. Let's see where they're at with all of this, and let's see if we're happy with it. And if not, then hey, we're going to ditch them and go to someone else. And that's our CEO. And the rest of us, sort of most of the people that are in Acumatica, we became pretty convinced that that's probably a mistake. That we're happy with Acumatica. We see its potential. We see that if we get all these bugs ironed out, get all the customizations that we need, et cetera, get all the setup that we need, that this is going to be a great solution. And if we go to someone else, we're pretty much just going to be 2 years behind, right? We're just going to start from snafu, while we were still able to be productive. In our view, it was like, we're at crunch time because the end of the year is coming up fast. We're at crunch time to try to get all these features working so we can show our CEO how great it is. And all of a sudden, so 30 days behind in one sense isn't that big of a deal. But from the idea that we're thinking of, like, hey, we need to really show Acumatica working great. 30 days, now at the end of September was quite a big chunk of time.
Mr. X, I love that. You just hit the nail on the head right there. That's not subtext. That's the main text.
Yeah, it really is.
It took us over 45 minutes to get there, right?
Oh man.
With some, it's not like we were trying to get there. We were I like having these informal meandering chats, but you try to get there on a support phone call. You don't have enough time with some, it's not like we were trying to get there. We were I like having these informal meandering chats, but you try to get there on a support phone call. You don't have enough time, right?
Yeah,
or
totally.
You can't explain that, or even if you can, the tech person on the other end doesn't care. They just need to know build numbers and what's my next technical step.
Sure.
But I think you just hit why it was great that we covered the small business aspect of this, because you're in this kind of in between phase between QuickBooks and Acumatica or another solution. And yeah, that's excellent context. So you basically got 4 months at the beginning of this month till the end of the year, right? So the issue wasn't the quote bugs that the upgrade introduced, you already had a lot of them and you were living with them. The bigger issue was that you just lost 1 month out of your 4 months. You just now quote bugs that the upgrade introduced. You already had a lot of them and you were living with them. The bigger issue was that you just lost 1 month out of your 4 months. You just now lost 25% of your time that was already crunch time to deliver for the board, right?
That's it. That's it exactly. And
You
not
weren't
even, yeah.
you weren't yeah, it's not that your business was dead in the water. Your ability to implement further features was dead in the water. Your hands were tied, maybe is a better way to say it.
That's it perfectly.
Moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I did, we had communicated that with our partner and, I think I had said at times like, hey, we're all on this same team now of like, hey, let's save this contract, and so that was, the big frustration. And especially, it's as we were getting toward the end of those 30 days, I didn't hit a point of despair.
Excellent points. And so I'm going to tell you a story about a not small business edition customer that I had some involvement with.
All right.
$80 million business doing about $80 million a year in revenue. And they were still running on Peachtree, which is basically the equivalent of QuickBooks. The thing was crashing all the time. Like it couldn't handle the volume. And then the biggest thing was it wasn't really handling inventory the way they needed. And so they go to Acumatica, but they like suffered on it for, I can't recall how long, maybe as long as a year or more. And their biggest problem was inventory. And it's interesting because to your point about lot numbers, and it's like, it's an inventory problem, right?
Right.
And they didn't have the supporting processes to really care about inventory. They had an inventory balance that was pretty big. I can't remember. It might've been like $8 to $10 million in processes to really care about inventory. They had an inventory balance that was pretty big. I can't remember. It might've been like $8 to $10 million in inventory, but yet they said they were a job shop. So everything has to be custom. Even their pricing, they couldn't come up with a pricing algorithm. They reviewed every single invoice that went out manually and sometimes changed prices manually.
Sounds like a sister company.
But they were of the size that it couldn't afford to do that anymore, right? So they're like really stuck in this. And it was a total mom and pop. It seemed like most people there were actually related to each other. And so changing that kind of culture is very hard. And so you can implement Acumatica, you can bring in the opening balances. They had challenges with that, but so they had some technical gripes. But even if you got that right, then on a month later, no one really cares about keeping an inventory updated. So you can't update. Hope that does not happen to you. And I'm searching for like, what are ways to prevent that from happening, right? How do you communicate that to the board? I don't have the answers there, but I hope you don't wind up in that same path.
Yeah, I am going to do everything in my power. I don't think we're gonna roll back to QuickBooks. I would be shocked if that happened. But your point about, right, how do you communicate these things? Because a lot of this is about communication, and also not just communication, but what I always call compliance. Is you need to get compliance from your employees, and if you make things too difficult, too many steps, even if you've got good employees that'll try their best, but if they get frustrated, they're going to pay less attention. And then with something like Acumatica, it just things steamroll, right? So if you choose the wrong serial number, it doesn't just affect that one sales order or shipment. It affects whatever the wrong serial number is now out of stock for when you want to go use that serial number. And then how do you communicate these things to your board or to your CEO? Like what is the software and what is our processes? When you're really several layers deep, and they potentially don't care about the exact technical issue, and how do you communicate these things, right, when they're I mean, I have trouble sometimes communicating them, me to our partner, and we're both pretty familiar with Acumatica, and so to communicate to the CEO or the board, and really have them understand,
Totally interwoven and intermixed relationship between your business process and the software, right?
yeah,
And the problem is your business process doesn't have a name, it doesn't have a logo, it doesn't have
right,
person's one person who's responsible for it. So you can't really blame it. It doesn't have like an address for you to send that complaint letter to.
yeah,
It's
right,
really your company address, but who's going to open that mail?
yeah,
And
sure,
then on the other hand, you got the software. It's got a logo, it's got a name. It's called Acumatica in this case. And that's just so easy to point to. That's the problem, right?
yeah,
And
oh
I
yeah,
think overall what you're trying to do is separate what's really a software problem versus what's a process problem, right? And it's
absolutely,
difficult to do that. And I think ultimate success is if you can communicate that. How you get there, is the question. Because if you can separate, and it's
absolutely,
difficult to do that. And I think ultimate success is if you can communicate that. How you get there, is the question. Because if you can separate those, and if you can prove that your challenges are mostly process, then you can make the case that it doesn't matter which software we go with, we're going to have the same challenges, right? But how you peel that, separate those like strong magnetic pulls is a challenge.
Yeah, 100%. You said it perfectly, Tim. And, and the thing to keep in mind too, at the same time you're trying to do this, potentially, your CEO or your board, is they're out there, they're watching the sales demos of all these other softwares, which of course are telling them, hey, we're going to do this and this and this, and you get all of that with the small business edition, and it's going to take care of all your problems, right? And so there you now this and this, and you get all of that with the small business edition, and it's going to take care of all your problems, right? And so there you're now just seeing the upside of all the other software versions, and it just becomes all that much easier to say the problem is Acumatica or whatever. The problem is Acumatica, and this new software is going to solve the problem. And it potentially could, but you're going to have to do all of the same setup and overhaul your processes, et cetera, to get there. And it could do it
Totally hear
much,
you.
much worse than Acumatica, like again, to come back, I've definitely become a huge fan. I mean, it's so apparent to me, a lot of the things they've done right and the power in it, and it's when it finally sort of clicked for me. Just in that I can see, how this can really be, customized to.
That I personally haven't used much in the real world, but I went to a 3-day training on it years ago and I loved it. I'll put it in the related links on this podcast episode as well.
Okay.
It's called the Graham process mapping methodology. And
Hmm.
there's actually two components to it. One is the methodology, which is what I'm most enthusiastic about. The second part is they do have a piece of software that helps you to do it, but you can do it on pen and paper. And what's really cool is the history on it, I think. It's, if I remember right, it's 4 generations, maybe 3, of Ben Grahams. And I can't remember all their names. It was like a Ben S. Graham, a Ben B. Graham, and then either S or B with a junior. So it's like three
Okay.
generations of father, son, father, son. And they started this when I can't remember when it was. Might have been 1930. Remember when it was. Might have been 1930s, where you really had office work start to become larger scale, because it used to be a
Sure.
bunch of smaller companies. You didn't have a huge office work component to it,
Right.
and there was a lot of process documentation on the manufacturing floor, but there wasn't anything for the office. And so one of the Ben Grahams, the first one, came up with this methodology for documenting the office work. And it's real simple. It's all shape based. And to me, what really captured me was the idea that you map out how things travel through your organization at a very granular level. And they were focused mostly on paper. And this is where I haven't crossed the bridge into doing it in a digital Acumatica world. I could see how you could do it. I just hadn't done one of these end to end. But you draw it out and then you put it on the wall in a conference room. This is what's on a physical piece of paper, and the software could print it out, and it's vector based. So you could print it on really large pieces of paper, or you just do it by hand. And then you all stand around it and you go through it together. And I would love to actually do one of those projects in the real world. I'll send you a link to
yeah, absolutely.
It.
I'm already in. It sounds fascinating.
I mean, ultimately, that to me is a practical tool, not the way, but potentially a way to separate the software from the process and really put the spotlight on the process and really define what it is you want to do as a business, right?
Yeah, and just as, just you saying what it is you want to do, right? I think that sounds like the type of tool, and separating the process from the software is something, rewinding, going way back to when you first start as a small business evaluating these softwares, that's something that I think could be insanely helpful, right? Is that if you had already started to try to separate the software from your process, and that could, give you some sort of a starting point as you go out and start to investigate, not necessarily ERP, but any software solution for your business.
Totally agree. Yeah. And what I love about the Scrum process mapping is it's visual. I've been in, if you've ever seen like a request for RFP, request for a proposal, request for quote, that's like a nightmare for someone selling software, because you have someone who like was paid by the hour likely to document process. And so of course they're going to generate a ton of documentation. But everyone I've seen is written. It's like in Word, and it's pays, but they'll hand you like this 15-page thing. Oh, this is everything that we do. Now demo it.
Yeah, right. Make it intuitive. Yeah. Learn it like the back of your hand. Sure.
So there's a double-edged sword to documentation. That's what I like about this one, though, is that it's visual. Now, because I don't have a ton of real world experience with it, it's a grass is greener type of thing for me. But I like the idea. And I like the idea of trying to draw things more in picture, because
I
think that's the only way you can communicate with the board anyways, or any, higher level management. It's got to be in pictures.
I think you're totally right. Yeah. And sometimes too, right? Like the board or the CEO, right? And in certain cases, when you dive into those deep technical details, they can even sometimes just like shut off, like, they're not necessarily interested in all of those details, right? So the more you can make it visual, like, they're not necessarily interested in all of those details, right? So the more you can make it visual, and the more you can really, lay it out there for them. I think the higher chance you have of successfully having that communication work both ways, successfully.
Well, I'm really rooting for Acumatica to survive in your organization. Before we wrap it up, maybe you could go and tell us, sounds like you did get to the end of the road on the upgrade, and tell us how you did that.
Yeah, so we did. So on this Friday on the 24th. So actually it was the 23rd. I had finally, I again sent out emails saying to our partners saying, what the heck's going on? It's coming out tomorrow. And finally Acumatica responded saying, and I don't fully understand, but Acumatica responded saying, and I don't fully understand, but what they said was that there were upgrade scripts in the build, the 2020 R1 build that we were on, which upgrade scripts which weren't functioning properly or something. And so they offered to manually do the upgrade. And I don't know what that means either. I don't know if they manually ran some scripts but they said they don't normally do it. But in our case, because by that time we and our partner had raised enough of a stink, they offered to do it manually. They did it. and it took like a half an hour and it was done. And we are gladly now on 2021 R1. And yeah, like I said, some of those bugs we were waiting for are already gone, but it happened on Friday, and it also issues again. And yeah, definitely, I think there's a high probability Acumatica is going to survive, and it's going to work out for us, and it's going to be a good relationship for the coming years for our company.
So what I hear there is that Acumatica bent over backwards, did some manual workaround, made it work, got you onto 2021 R1. And I'll just say this about it. If you were on NetSuite, I'm 99.9% sure that that would not have been an option. You're too small. You're not important enough. And Acumatica made it happen. So props to Acumatica on that, even though it did take 30 days to work all the way through it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, in a perfect world, I think I would have wished that happened maybe at that 2 week earlier mark, but, it did happen. Right. And this edition, I could easily see a company just saying, hey, they're not worth it. Right. But Acumatica, ultimately did not do that. They got us upgraded. And so, yeah, we're happy now.
Well, you've got 3 months left, it sounds like, to communicate in pictures to the board, get people to really be enthusiastic about Acumatica. There's one company I saw during the implementation, they threw like a little Acumatica party, and they even made cookies in the shape of the Acumatica logo. So do whatever it takes to
Hey,
to
it's not
get
a
the
bad
emotional
idea.
tide flowing in your direction.
Yeah. Hey,
You
I
got
just
3 months, it sounds like.
yeah, find out what's his sweet tooth. Yeah, we'll get our baking skills. That might push us over the edge. Well, hey, thank you, Tim. And again, man, we cannot sing your praises enough. For a small, what's his sweet tooth? Yeah, we'll get our baking skills. That might push us over the edge. Well, hey, thank you, Tim. And again, man, we cannot sing your praises enough, for a small business, especially back before the community forums on Acumatica, man, the AUG forums were just a lifesaver, man. And not just the forums, but your blog posts and everything. So from all of us end users out there, let me say a big thank you to you and what you've done, and everyone who has participated in your forum, everyone who participates on the community forums. Just making those active is an insanely beneficial part, I think, to the success, at least for us. But I'm a big believer that it's in Acumatica's best interest to encourage that as much as possible.
Thanks for saying all that. I love transparency. I think overall positive in the end, you work through it. So thanks for taking the time today, Mr. X.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Tim. I appreciate it.
All right. I hope to catch up with you sometime next year and see how things went.
That'd be great. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUG Forum.